What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. The first live stream of the year. Hopefully you guys had a great holiday and New Year's. We are definitely excited to get back on the grind with these weekly live streams every Tuesday. And tonight, I wanted to start off the new year 2022 with a bang and try to convince Randy Blockett to get a Livescope. I have put together a detailed argument. I have read up on all of Randy's different arguments, why he doesn't like Livescope, all the different reasonings, and I'm going to try to use everything at my disposal to convince Randy to get a Garmin Livescope or some type of forward-facing sonar. So, Randy, are you ready for this battle of wits and discussion today?
You got a pretty steep hill to climb tonight, Johnny, I think, on that, but I'm up for the challenge, man. It's just good to be back. I'm sort of glad the holidays are over. We had around the house here, we had the total of 7 birthdays over the last month and a half.
Wow.
Christmas, Thanksgiving. So I am burned out on holidays, man. Getting ready in a couple of weeks. Got our first Bassmaster Open down at Lake Toho of the year. So getting ready for all that.
That's awesome. Good deal. Well, I'm excited to start off the tournament season following you around, Randy, and all the other guys. Matt Steffen, John Sukup. We're going to be following a lot of guys here on the live stream, having them on throughout the season, and hopefully that we can, get a lot of ideas from all 3 of those guys on, better tournament strategies and how to catch more fish this spring and throughout the rest of the year. So, Randy, first off, I do want to make a disclaimer that all of this is in good fun. Randy and I are not going to be mad at each other after this live stream. This is just all in good fun. I am going to be going pretty hard at Randy on some of these points to try to convince him and win the battle here, but it's definitely not going to cause any problems between me and Randy. We're not going to be upset with each other, so just want to put that out there. I know people like to get upset about stuff on the internet nowadays, especially now, so we are not actually arguing. We don't argue ever, so just want to put that out there as a disclaimer.
Yeah, we should have the all the viewers. We should take a poll at the end of the deal, see who won the debate tonight. We'll leave it up to the viewers on that.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll put a poll out on the live stream channel. I can actually do that on the community page, so I'll put that out afterwards for everybody. There we go. Okay, one other thing, too. I wanted to let everyone know if you are part of the Deep Dive app beta. And actually, let me pull that up really quick, and I will show you guys that. The Deep Dive app is this right here. If you check this out, it is an app that I'm working on developing that's going to give you real-time bass fishing strategies with different weather conditions, lake conditions, and then those strategies will adjust based on those conditions to hopefully give you the best strategies to catch fish. We have a lot of different inputs. You can scan ahead up to 4 days in advance to plan for future fishing trips and get detailed structure and cover illustrations. The app is coming very, very soon, guys. It's not available quite yet. We have a beta that we opened up that guys are a part of. We had to close that because we filled it up way too fast. But what we're going to be doing, guys, is we're going to be continuing to test this beta for a little while longer, and we actually added a lot more lakes. We have over 350 lakes now in the app. We opened it up to all bodies of water, so if you are in that beta group, you've downloaded this app, make sure you head over to your app, open the program, the test flight program, update it for me, and if you do that, then you'll be able to see all the new lakes that are in there, and a lot of the lakes that you may have requested are going to be in there as well. So definitely check that out and continue to give us feedback through our email at the bottom here, help@deepdiveapp.com. The more input we can get before this launches, the better we can make it, and we can fix all the little bugs and things like that that are just going to be there with any sort of app that's launched. I'll be making some YouTube videos on this app in a very short amount of time here, and I'll actually, when it launches, have those YouTube videos going out. We'll talk about here in the live stream. So you don't have to wait long for this, but we just do a little more testing just to make sure that everything is polished up on our end. So just a little housekeeping tip there. Seeing some guys already here saying they're part of the app, which is awesome. Saying they're enjoying it. Okay. There we go. Let's jump into it then, Randy. Oh, one more thing. Sorry, guys. We gotta get all our housekeeping out of the way. New year. I'm just so anxious to get into this debate with Randy. But one other thing to call out, guys, is that we are going to be doing a Bridgeford beef jerky giveaway as always. We have our great sponsor Bridgeford that sponsors the podcast, as well as the Bass Tank, which we're going to be talking about here in just a second. Got my Bass Tank hat on for good luck as we talk about Livescopes. We'll talk about Bass Tank here in just a second, but we are going to be doing a Bridgeford beef jerky giveaway for a free case of 12 packages of Bridgeford beef jerky later on the stream. Huge shout out to Bridgeford for supporting the Fish the Moment podcast and live stream, and thanks for your continued support into 2022. Kept our sponsor, Randy. I'm happy they like what we're doing here, and it's thanks to you guys on the stream going out and actually buying jerky, so really appreciate that. Okay, anything else, Randy, that you want to talk about before we jump into the debate?
I'm good to go. Fire away when ready, man.
Okay, so let's get a little summary, Randy, from you first on your main reasons why you dislike Livescope. I just want, in your words, for maybe someone, if there's anyone in the fishing community who's missed one of your Livescope rants, they're missing out. But maybe just give us like a quick couple-minute bullet points of your key things that you dislike about Livescope or the reasons you don't use it on your boat and in tournaments.
Okay, there's two elements to my argument with it. The first one is that it creates an unlevel playing field in the sport. And people can argue back and forth, but the standard setup anymore basically is 2 units on the console and 2 to 3 units up front. We're getting to see more common 3 units up front. And, so when you have 5 units in the boat, you're talking upwards $15,000, $20,000 in electronics, the way that's set up. Given that being said, the equipment regulations and tournaments are not the same for everybody. So anyone can have whatever they want. And you may have one person that has the resources to have $20,000 worth of electronics, and then you have somebody else that simply does not have the resources to do it, and all they can afford is a 9-inch 2D sonar unit. So from that standpoint, it creates an unlevel playing field from a financial standpoint. But my main, gripe about the thing is the fact that where does technology lead you? It takes you away from all of the stuff that fishing's all about. It takes you away from, the connection of nature, the primal aspect of it, the mysterious aspect of it, the magical aspect of it. Those are the properties that attract people to fishing to begin with. Fishing is not about, idling around the middle of the lake or trolling around the middle of the lake with your trolling motor, looking down at a screen for 8 hours. I mean, that's not fishing. That's just that. I mean, you can call it catching or whatever, but it's not fishing. So my main thing, just a brief capitalization, is it takes away the purity of the sport and it creates an unlevel playing field.
Okay. So I'm going to take a crack at both of those arguments, and the second one's going to be tough because Randy is very entrenched in that, and that's going to be a tough one. But on the price point, Randy, I have a couple of ideas there that might be able to sway you a little bit. And actually, maybe it's a little bit of a low blow, but I'm going to start with my best argument here first on Randy. So what I want to talk about first is the price of Livescope and the price of Fish Finder electronics overall. And as you guys know, this live stream is sponsored by the Bass Tank out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the BassTank.com here is where you can go check out all of their products. The one thing that Randy's talked about is the fact that he doesn't like guys having 5 units on their boat, $20,000 worth of electronics. And I completely get that. One thing, though, is that the head of the Bass Tank, John Sukup here, great angler, won 2 National Professional Fishing League tournaments this past year, finished second at the Bassmaster Open on Grand Lake that Randy fished, actually. And in that event, Randy, you actually saw his boat. He had 1 Livescope unit on the front of his boat, a Garmin, and 1 on the back of his boat. That's it. He has 2 fish finders, a Garmin up front with Livescope and 1 Garmin in the back. Now, he has a pretty big unit. It's like a 12-inch unit, but he runs 2 fish finders, and he is one of the best Livescope anglers in the entire country, and he's only running 2 units on his boat. Now, if we take a look at the price of a single Livescope unit here on the BassTank.com, I pulled some of their deals up here. Right here is a current deal that we have for the Bass Tank, and you can get a 9-inch 93 SV unit with a Panoptix Livescope transducer bundle for $2,199. So that's the price of a Livescope unit if you want to just put that up on the front of your boat, $2,000, which is still not cheap. However, Randy, just on the price comparison, I know the fish finders you have in your boat, and the fish finder that's up on the front deck of your boat you have is a Humminbird Helix 10 Chirp Mega Side Imaging GPS Gen 4. It retails for $1,999. So from a price perspective for your boat, the only difference between your 10-inch Humminbird Helix unit on your boat and a 9-inch Garmin with Livescope is $199. So that's your price difference right there that you're looking at for your fish finders. Now, obviously, some guys are not going to have this mega imaging and the side imaging and all that stuff, and maybe you would just have like a 9-inch Humminbird, and yeah, then you can get that, like the one I have in the front of my boat, it's like $1,200. So, yes, it's definitely to the point where you could say that it's still an extra $1,000 put Livescope on your boat, and that could be a deal breaker. But for a lot of tournament anglers and things like that, I know a lot of guys that at least will put the money down for one 10-inch fish finder in the $1,500 to $2,000 range, and they'll have one on the front of their boat and one on the back of their boats with the total cost of about, maybe $4,000. And to make it even better, the way I used to run my fish finder setup is I ran basically this exact setup. I actually have an older unit that's a 10-inch, but it doesn't have all the features. It's not touchscreen. So it's the same price point here, $2,200 on Livescope. And then on the back of my boat, all I ran was the Humminbird Helix 9 unit with the side imaging, which was only about $1,200. So for the total price of my fish finders on my boat, and I ran this for like a year and a half during our challenges when we were fishing and everything, it was $3,000 to put fish finders on my boat, and that's with a Livescope. So from a cost perspective, I don't think that Livescope is this astronomically different spectrum, and I know that there are guys who just can't afford to do what they need to do, but at the same time, it's like if you're fishing and you want to be successful and you want to have a career, you want to win money, and you're putting $5,000 down for a fishing tournament to fish the Bassmaster Opens or the Elite Series, or $3,000 for a fishing tournament, most anglers aren't doing that anyways. And even guys who are putting in for weekend derbies are putting up $200 or $300 entry fees. Those anglers, I feel like, have the means to be able to get one Livescope bundle for $2,000 if they're that invested, especially if they have an $80,000 bass boat or even a $40,000 bass boat. So I know that there are guys out there that can't afford the most expensive units, and I completely understand that. But I do think for the average open level or like intermediate level bass fisherman, Livescope is not this out of range thing. That's my first argument.
Well, I would counter that. First of all, I get a quick question before I counter that. Does that particular unit come with side imaging, down imaging, and GPS?
This one here?
The one that you're showing? No, not that one. The one you're showing, the Livescope.
It just has the Livescope on it, but okay, it's on the front of the boat.
Okay, so you're just talking about the Livescope unit, but in reality, Johnny, we all know that people just don't have a Livescope unit. The standard setup anymore is 2 units on the console, 2 up front, 2 to 3 up front. So you don't ever see anybody with just one Livescope on their boat.
But John does. John Sukup.
Well, he's an exception. He's the only one that I've ever seen like that. The point of the overall thing, Livescope is only part of the expanding technology that I'm railing against here when I talk about the unlevel playing field, because and I can do a survey when I go down to Lake Toho as far as how many units most people have on there and the cost of it versus somebody that simply can't afford it. Because if you take some guy, say you got some 21-year-old kid that, maybe they come from a single parent family, they don't have any money, they're ate up with fishing, they want to be a pro fisherman worse than anything in the world, and all they can afford is like a 20-year-old beat up bass boat with a 7-inch Humminbird Helix or something on like that. And he's in the tournament. And then you got somebody else that comes from a very wealthy background. They're set up with 5 units. They've got Livescope. They've got whatever. Immediately that creates an unlevel playing field. That's my big point of the technology of it. And But yeah, you can argue as far as the unit itself, yeah, it's comparable in price. But in the reality of the situation, that's not what we're seeing on the boats. That's not the setup. John Sukups he's a minority by having one like that.
I guess the argument then you're making is not so much against Livescope; it's more against bass fishing electronics in general. Because if you were worried about the Livescope component, the price, you're more worried about people having 6 units. Because like when I was fishing against you in our challenges all last year, I had one Livescope unit on the front of my boat that was this price plus that Humminbird unit. So I had 2 fish finders on my boat, and in those challenges, another low blow at you, Randy. Again, this is all for good fun, guys. But I won 9 out of those 10 challenges, and I'm running a 2005 Triton, 18 foot with a 150 horsepower engine, and I'm running a 9-inch Humminbird fish finder with side imaging, down imaging, and a $2,000 Livescope. And I was able to beat a 30 or tour pro 9 out of 10 times with that technology. And my boat, all in package, was probably about a fifth of the price of your entire rig. So I just think that there is a way to do it economically, and the guys who do want to get the Livescope, they could do what I do, buy Abu Garcia Black Max reels. They could buy $100 fishing rods and buy cheaper fishing lures, and they can save money elsewhere and then spend it on the electronics. And that's how I've always done it. Instead of spending more money on baits and tackle, I put it into the electronics, even though I didn't have the most funds. So I do think that it's also a matter of just how you distribute your fishing income, because fishing is expensive across the board, whether it's, you know, a really expensive jerkbait, a really expensive $200 or $300 fishing rod, gas for the boat. There's so many other factors that are expensive. So I don't think that that should limit people from getting Livescope. It's just, where do you choose to put that discretionary income? And I get your point on having 5 fish finders. I think that's ridiculous as well. But I don't think it's a reason that we shouldn't have Livescope. It maybe is just an idea that maybe we should limit it to 1 fish finder, something like that.
Well, here's the metamorphosis that we've seen. But up until probably about 1995, everybody on the tour, everybody out there, they had a flasher on the console and they had a flasher up front. That's just what everybody had. Nobody had anything else than that. I was one of the first guys that ever ran 2 flashers up front, because the only reason I did that is in case one broke down, I'd have another one to watch, and they broke down all the time back then. So you talk 30 years ago, everybody was on the same playing field right up there. Right now, we've transcended that to a point that it's just, the trajectory is just skyrocketing out there. So my point on this thing is, okay, we've got Livescope right now, we've got Active Target, we've got all this type of stuff. At what point is this enough? Are we going to turn into a group of fishermen where it's just nothing but a bunch of Cody Huffs out there that are, trolling around in the middle of the lake looking for individual fish that are in little wolf packs out there? Or are we going to actually, fish, like most people fish? And at what point is it too much? And I always go back to the analogy when you're talking about equipment technology. Let's say, for example, somebody develops a professional golfer develops this putter that it's got some type of magnetic device that allows you to sink 100% of your putts from any distance away. And this putter cost $1 million and it was legal in the tournament. At that point, and say all these pros start using this $1 million putter and everybody's one putting in every single pro tournament out there. That's on one end of the extremity, but what is stopping that as far as the technology, the way it's advancing right now in bass fishing, eventually to get to that point where you just do not have the same type of element that you had 30, 40, 50 years ago. And every sport has cut that off. Bass fishing is the only ones. And just like Jonny and I were talking earlier, that you guys saw the Boone and Crockett article that I did in my YouTube video today. Boone and Crockett said, we're not going to honor any record animals that is taken with this high-tech equipment. All these high-tech scopes, the drones, the GPS, all this type of stuff. If you take an animal, they're not going to acknowledge that that's a record. In my opinion, the same thing should happen with bass fishing tournaments. Eventually you get to the point where you win a tournament with all this high-tech stuff that's just going out and wait in left field, your tournament win should be invalid, because that is just not fishing. At that point, it becomes a commercial pursuit of catching and not fishing. And then you get back into the abstract. Once I start, delving off into that, you're not talking about an intellectual point of view as much. You're talking about more of a philosophical point of view. And that's when you have disagreements, because everybody has different philosophical viewpoints.
Yeah, and I understand that all, Randy, and you think you've talked about that several times. And I guess the one thing I want to separate from this argument is the argument of why we should be using Livescope. And I think that you're more against Livescope in theory, in the fact that you think that it's a gateway towards more technology that's going to be intrusive. I honestly think, though, Randy, this is my opinion, I think that 95% of bass fishermen, even bass fishermen on the professional level, don't understand how effective and useful side and down imaging are, and they still don't to this day. Side and down imaging came out in 2006, and Kevin Van Dam used side imaging and down imaging before anyone else did and dominated the sport of bass fishing for literally 5 or 6 years. The thing is that people didn't understand side imaging technology enough to understand what it was capable of, and how it worked. So they just assumed that Kevin Van Dam was just his best, most amazing angler. But Kevin Van Dam worked with Humminbird and had side imaging and all the best side imaging stuff way before anyone else did, and was kicking everyone's butt because of that. It's like Tiger Woods having the Nike golf ball that had the best cover on it, and he kicked everyone's butt in golf for years because he had a better golf ball than everyone. And everyone says that the golf ball technology is what's advanced more than anything else in the sport of golf over the past 30 years. So I think what's happening is that Livescope is that next step up, but because of social media and a lot of other things, and it's a little bit easier to grasp conceptually, everyone's freaking out like, oh my gosh, Livescope is ruining fishing. Where I think side and down imaging are still more effective tools for finding and catching fish than Livescope is. It's just Livescope is easier to grasp in the social media era. I think if we had social media during Livescope and side imaging, during side imaging and down imaging, when that first came out, people would be freaking out and saying that that's going too far and we should ban side imaging, ban down imaging, because it's incredible technology. And I just don't think that Livescope is having that kind of going to the point where we're hunting after, fish with radar and drones and stuff like that. I don't think that we're there yet with technology. But just like in golf, there is going to be a point, I feel like, where the equipment has to be capped. They're not going to let people use bigger drivers and more forgiving clubs and better golf balls that go straight every time. There's going to be a point where regulation happens. I just don't think Livescope is that point. And honestly, I think that, Randy, you having side imaging on your boat probably goes more against your ideals than even having Livescope on your boat. Because I think side imaging was a bigger leap forward in effectiveness of catching fish in the whole realm of fish than Livescope. That's at least my opinion.
Well, I think that, to me, Livescope was like the final straw. I mean, I was getting a little bit irritated at down imaging and side imaging, but when Livescope came out, that's when I just dug my heels in and say, enough's enough. So, at what point, okay, say for example, next year, somebody at Garmin develops some type of infrared whatever, and you've got this unit that you can put in the water, and you can see underwater just like you're watching television at the house. And then all of a sudden you've got 4 units up front. All these guys, they've got a Livescope, they've got the infrared, they've got the down imaging, side imaging, 2D sonar, GPS, they've got all this type of stuff. At what point do you just say, we have got to reel it back? I'm one of those guys. To me, it's not about getting left behind. That's a poor argument, because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about keep up with technology or you're going to get left behind. That's not the point. The point for me is more about at what point, do you start losing something? Not only losing something as far as what the sport offers to anglers, but you start losing the quality of the fishing that you have. At some point, are we going to get so adept at catching these bass in the lakes that eventually the fishing quality deteriorates even more than it is now as a result of that? In my opinion, I think that there are far, far fewer fish in our lakes today than there were 40 years ago. I just think that we have gotten so good at catching the fish that are out there that you see these Elite Series tournaments where guys bring in 25 pounds of smallmouth and this and that. And I think that that's almost an illusion to how the fishing quality is not that good. It just seems that good. And that's why I always go back to tournaments are a great representation of the quality of the fishery, that you can never look at the top end of the tournament. You always have to look at the last 25% of the field to see what they've caught. That gives you more of a realistic point of view on that. And I just see expanding technology not only taking away the intrinsic value of fishing, putting bass fishing out of reach on a competitive level for a lot of people, but deteriorating the quality of our fishery as a result. And I don't see any benefit out of it when you're talking about why people fish, and I see it all the time. People reach out to me all the time about how, man, fishing saved me. Fishing is it's if it wasn't for fishing, I'd go crazy. Or guys I've talked to, wounded warriors I fish with, man, how therapeutic fishing it is. The dudes that I've taken out from the Wounded Warrior program, they don't get therapy from catching bass at Livescope. It's going out there and hearing those birds chirping while they're flipping a jig on a laydown, So
I don't feel like Livescope though would take away from their enjoyment though. That's the thing, is I don't think that having Livescope would make their experience any worse. That's my thought there. I think that they would say, wow, this is cool technology. At least that's my opinion. I think that it opens up that world and allows you to see and understand fish. And we'll get into that here in a second. But one other thing I do want to point out here, there's a lot of people saying that, Jonny, you and Randy should fish without Livescope, because if you fish without Livescope, Randy would destroy you, kick your butt. Okay, well, here's the thing about that. If Randy didn't have Livescope, I would still have side imaging and down imaging, and I actually didn't have Livescope in my boat for the first half of the challenges Randy and I did against each other, and I still was winning without Livescope. And I think I won our first 4 challenges with no Livescope. I just had electronics.
Hey, I got to interrupt you 1 second here, Jonny, to the viewers here. You cannot go by what Jonny says on competition, because he's a freak of nature. Jonny Schultz would dominate on the Elite Series to the point of which it'd be like Kevin Van Dam on steroids. You guys don't believe me? Come out here and get you some of it. See how, go one-on-one against Jonny and see, because so when Jonny says he's doing this or that, it's because he's a freak of nature as a fisherman. So I concede that to you, Jonny.
Well, one thing I would say too, and that one other thing I will concede, is that we did some challenges, Randy, where I didn't have my electronics, and you won both of those challenges. So when we did challenges no electronics at all, you beat me in those. The thing is that I learned how to fish with electronics. That's how I learned to fish. That's my style of fishing, and it was legal and allowed. So I've based all of my fishing on using electronics. It's kind of like going and saying, okay, for the golfers, you can give Tiger Woods against who are Jack Nicklaus against Tiger Woods, and they would say, oh, Jack Nicklaus would destroy Tiger Woods if they're using persimmon woods and leather-bound golf balls, and they didn't have all the shoes and all that stuff. And they're like, okay, yeah, but Tiger grew up with all that stuff, and he learned to play with all those things. So obviously, Jack might have an advantage because he was working with that older technology. So if I never learned to fish with electronics and had to learn the other way, I feel like I would be obviously way better without electronics. But because that's how I learned to fish, I don't know other ways to fish, because electronics have always been legal since the time. When I first started fishing, there was no side imaging, down imaging. It came out when I was like 13 years old, and ever since it came out, I embraced it fully. So yes, I think the point is that Randy would beat me if I had no electronics, but it's also like you basically eliminate all of my fishing experience from the time I was 13 and on. So basically, I'm now going back to being a fisherman of 2-3 years of fishing experience. It doesn't make sense. So I'll put that out there. And if you guys want to say, oh, Randy will beat me with electronics, I concede that. Randy would destroy me if I had no electronics on my boat 9 times out of 10. Would you say that's fair, Randy?
No, I wouldn't say that fair. I don't discount you from anything, man. I know how tough you are to beat. I've fished against you too many times. And that's what we talked about before, guys. It's like when all you guys out there, when you get over 50 years old, you start losing your edge, man. And you got guys like Jonny that are still young whippersnappers. They've got the creativity, they've got the imagination, and they do things they don't know any better. I wouldn't try certain things that Jonny would try. I mean, he was fishing a Nico rig last year in 25 foot of water. I never would have tried that and caught fish doing it. So young guys are just they're just more creative, more they have more ingenuity than the older dudes out there. That's part of the cycle of life, man. It is.
For sure. Some guys are saying they want to go against me on an unfamiliar body of water with no practice. Like, that would give them an advantage, Randy. All I'm saying is I'm better when I have no practice and no knowledge of a lake. Would you agree with that? Yeah. I normally catch them better when I don't know anything about the lake. When I get preconceived notions, that's when I start messing up.
Yeah, I'm telling you guys right now, you don't want any part of it, man. You don't.
Okay, so let's keep rolling, Randy. Next point. So one thing I'm actually going to start, I now have PowerPoint slides we're pulling out, Randy, because I want to start explaining something else. So we looked at, websites, but now we're pulling up PowerPoint slides. So the next argument you have, Randy, is about the fact that the Livescope is taking away the mystique or the mystery of bass fishing, and it's making it so that you don't know what's going on under the water. You know exactly what's going on in the water in every moment, and it's basically like you don't ever have the ability to get that mystery back. What I would say is that the mystery of bass fishing left a very long time ago with the introduction of side imaging and down imaging. And let me pull up just a few examples of this, guys, because I think that the issue I have with this whole idea is that Livescope is giving you a better understanding of what's going on under the water than, let's say, a down imaging or side imaging image. And if we take a look at some of these images, or even like 2D sonar, guys, you can get really good pictures of schools of fish and know what's going on. I'm just going to pull up a few images here of some areas, for example, on my down imaging, where you can clearly see all of these fish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, it's not easy to interpret these images, but you can still get a very clear picture of what's going on under the water in an image like this. Pull up a different image here. You can see under the water here. Here's your bait fish. You have a brush pile over here. You have a stump. You have more brush out to the right in your side imaging. This all uncovers what's going on under the water already. And with my side and down imaging, guys, I can find fish very easily any depth of water from 2 feet of water all the way out to 50 feet of water, because I have a lot of experience using that technology. And I can see fish on the bottoms in 4 foot of water, or I can see them out suspended. And the thing about down imaging and side imaging is that it makes it very easy to catch fish and find fish that are related to some type of cover, like rocks, like a brush pile, things like that. And if there is a grouping of fish that's related around a brush pile or related around a rock pile like this, I am able to go target those fish and I'm able to catch them very easily. And one thing I always hear back in the day, Randy, from guys who are guides, like when I talk to Rick Clun, Tommy Martin, all those guys who are like the legends of the sport, they'll tell us days where they used to find these offshore honey holes where they could go out in the middle of the lake, and you told me this on Grand. They tie up to a tree on Toledo Bend and cast at one spot and catch 40 to 45 pounds of fish like it's nothing. 5 fish limits, 8 and 9 pounders coming across the board like crazy. And the reason for that is those fish were just not pressured. No one was out here looking for them because it was that mystery of fishing. You had no idea where in the lake you were casting. You just kind of had to randomly cast around. There was not even a flasher. Now, with side imaging and down imaging, I can see every fish that's on the spot if I graph it with the right angle and with the right technique. I can find every single rock, every single brush with side imaging, no problem. And I've been able to do that since it was introduced in 2006, 2007, or whenever it came out, or maybe 2008. Whenever it came out, I could do that. The thing about that then is that Livescope doesn't give you a better understanding of where fish are under the water or unveil any more of the mystery, at least for myself. I can see everything that I see on Livescope with my down imaging and my side imaging without question. There is literally nothing I cannot see with Livescope that I can't see on side imaging and down imaging. The thing about Livescope that makes it so effective is not the fish that are related to these hardcover objects, or even identifying if there's fish on an area. Instead, the fish that Livescope helps you catch are the ones that are suspended and are roaming, or they're on the move. The reason this is so important is because when you're graphing over an offshore brush pile, for example, like this, if you graph over that brush pile, you can mark a waypoint there, spin around, cast at that waypoint, or drop a orange marker buoy if you don't want to use technology. Just drop an orange marker buoy on that brush pile, spin around and cast on it. And if those fish are positioned and locked in there, they are going to be there and you're going to be able to catch those fish. However, you could potentially find a spot where you graph over a school of fish. They're there 1 minute, you mark a waypoint, the next minute they're gone. And what's happening is that those fish are not locked in on a piece of cover or a piece of like a rock pile. They're randomly chasing and swimming around shad. And the reason that Livescope is so effective on these fish is that you can follow those migratory bass around and target them specifically, the ones that are roaming on shad. The fish that are locked in on these brush piles or on these rock piles, I can catch those fish 100% the same with or without Livescope. If you took Livescope off my boat and those fish are locked in on a brush pile or on a rock pile, I will catch the same exact number of fish in those scenarios. All the fish I catch on Livescope are the ones that are suspended out here chasing randomly. And what's happened is because of the excess fishing pressure over the past few years, the fish are no longer positioning on hard cover or on brush piles like this, like they used to. They're getting out and suspending because these brush piles and rock piles are getting more fishing pressure. These fish then become nomadic or pelagic and they start roaming around, and those are your bigger fish, your really big quality fish. And the reason that these guys are catching these record fish, these 8-10 pounders, is because they're able to follow these schools of fish around, locate them, and then catch them. Now, if you talk to John Sukup, who's one of the best in the entire world at locating and following bass, he never just drops his Livescope in the water and just starts Livescoping around. 100% of the time, I've been in the boat with him, and I do this too. I've been in the boat with him, and he's taught me, and I've learned the whole process, is he still graphs with his 2D sonar, down imaging, and side imaging to find the schools of baitfish and find these bass that are roaming around. What happens, though, is that after he finds them with his side imaging and down imaging, and the reason he uses those is because they're more effective. Side imaging and down imaging, you can idle at 5 miles an hour versus going a mile and a half per hour on your trolling motor. So you can cover more water with down imaging. You can also cover more water with side imaging out right and left of the boat to find these schools of baitfish. So what John is then doing, and what I do, is once we see those fish on our fish finder, we stop, drop the Livescope, and we can then follow those fish around. And those are the fish that are getting caught on Livescope for the most part by these really good anglers that are catching these big bags. It's these roaming fish on these baitfish. The guys who are saying that they are catching more fish because of Livescope, because they're fishing around hard cover where bass are stationary, brush piles, rock piles, in my honest opinion, it's just because they're not good enough with their side imaging and down imaging and a marker buoy or waypoints to be able to fish those fish effectively. I feel like I can, and Livescope gives me no advantage in those scenarios. The only advantage it gives me is those roaming fish because I can follow them around. Now, if you might say that is ruining the magic of fishing, maybe, but the other thing is that I'm already finding the fish in all those scenarios with existing technology that's been out for over 15 years. It's now 18 years at this point. This technology's been out, and it's completely opened up all the world of fishing. All the mystery's already gone, Randy. It's been gone. You just didn't notice it. It's been gone for almost 20 years. Mystery is gone. So Livescope isn't actually... It did nothing to change the mystery of bass fishing. That damage has been done for 20 years. All it's doing is Livescope is easier to interpret for the average person just looking at it than side imaging and down imaging. Side imaging and down imaging are not easy to understand. I have a 1 million view YouTube video on how to understand side imaging because people watch it so many times it's so confusing. But if you understand how it works, you can actually find more fish and find fish easier with this technology, and it uncovers all of that much easier than Livescope. So that is my argument there, Andy, that Livescope hasn't changed how much of fishing is a mystery. It's just people haven't taken the time to learn the technology to uncover the mystery.
Okay,
Boom.
I'm gonna pull you back down to a primal level after that dissertation there. First of all, if it was up to me, I wish we never would have progressed past flashers, because I lost interest in technology when flashers went to the very rudimentary 2D sonar. There was something about that I didn't like. I didn't like the way that felt. I stayed with flashers longer than what most people did, up until, man, probably the early part of the 2000s at least. So to answer, to sort of address that part of it there, I agree. There's a lot of it has not been a mystery for a long time. I wish we could take it back to the 2D sonar. Here's my point again, where I want to drag it back down to the more primal level. And because everybody I see on the comments here, they talk about, yeah, you got to keep up with the times. That's progress. You're going to get left behind. This isn't progress, in my opinion, guys. This is my viewpoint on this. It's just like last month when some developer here in Springfield bulldozed a 5-acre tract of 200-year-old oak trees down to put a gas station in, calling it progress. I don't call that progress. I call that a major step backwards. And it's the same thing about the technology we're talking about. Now let me give you guys an analogy about bows, because a lot of you guys are bow hunters out there. 1,000 years ago, this is how it happened. The Indians would go out into the woods. They would spend days trying to identify the perfect sapling to make a bow out of. They would go into the forest and they would try to find the areas that were cut off from sunlight, because the sunlight would cause the growth rings on the trees to be closer together, which would make a bow that snapped a lot harder. This would go on for days. Then they finally would ask this sapling if it was okay for them to cut it down with a stone tool. And they handcrafted this bow by hand. And then they had to go out and track the animal. They had to get to know the animal on an intimate level before they actually use the bow. Now you go into Bass Pro Shop, I look at the bows hanging up on the walls. They don't even look like bows. They look like something you see out of the Terminator movie. There's nothing about them that looks like a bow. And you got guys that are using trail cams, game cams, drones, that type of stuff. Everybody's lost their ability to track. Everybody's lost their ability to become in tune with the concentric rings in the forest. This is what I'm talking about. This is my point. We have lost that. We have lost that in our generation. Those skills that we had for thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years on a primal level are gone. And it's the same with bass fishing. All of the skills that make a good bass angler, your awareness for nature on an intimate level, your ability to read wind, light conditions, sun, subtle changes in the environment, adapt to different things. People are losing that. And I see it all the time. Like when I go to Table Rock now, everybody out there is trolling around the middle of the lake with their head glued looking at a Livescope. They are becoming completely desensitized to what it is that fishing is all about. It's the same with hunting. That's what I go back to every single time. That's what we're losing out of this thing that most people are just oblivious about. So yeah, that's my response to that.
I think, Randy, that's the... I'm seeing some comments here as well as the couple things about this that obviously I think my perspective is different, just because I have literally thousands of hours behind a fish finder and I know how to interpret side imaging, down imaging. But the learning curve on that, the time it took me to learn all of that, was very, very steep. And Livescope, the learning curve is much flatter. So it's much easier to uncover the mystery with Livescope. It still takes time on the water, but it's more approachable. And that means that more guys are putting their head down and just staring at the screen and doing that, even if it doesn't actually make them better fishermen. I'm seeing so many guys here who say, I have all the Livescopes and everything on my boat, 5 units on my boat, and I still can't catch a fish. And I see that more than anything. Guys say, man, I bought this $2,000 Livescope because I thought it was going to make me a better fisherman, and it didn't help me hardly at all. Well, the problem with that is that these guys are getting this Livescope, and they still don't know how to use their side imaging and down imaging units that they bought on their boat 5 years ago for $3,000, and they turn on one time to see the water temperature and the spawn, and then the rest of the time they're turned off. And that's a lot of times what guys do, and they have this great technology, but either they don't have the time, which is completely understandable, or they just don't want to put the effort in to learn it, which for me was graphing for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of a fishing day to learn that technology. So I think that's the thing, is this Livescope makes that learning curve seem smaller, but if you just learn how to use Livescope, you're not going to be better than the guy who knows how to use side imaging, down imaging, plus Livescope. It's just not the deal. And so I think that's part of it. And I also see with the idea that if you have Livescope, I'm seeing our comments over here, you can still see your bait. You can see how the fish react to your bait and how they move against your bait. And yes, that is cool. That is also very overrated in a lot of extents. There are times when that can be very helpful if you want to coax an individual fish for a long time. The times where that actually is super effective is not that great. I do think that sometimes it can be helpful, but a lot of the things that I see in bass behavior, I've just learned through fishing experience, how I retrieve my bait, when to stop and pause and stuff like that. So a lot of it can be learned, but I think the big thing with Livescope is it takes that learning curve and it shrinks it down, which I don't think is a bad thing. I personally think that people shouldn't have to spend 1,000 hours behind their fish finders graphing around when they have 3 kids and they only get to fish once or twice a month. I think that it opens up a new possibility of fishing out in the middle of the lake, new water to anglers, especially on crowded lakes, and it gives them that ability to learn. And I think a lot of reasons why, Randy, I think guys are so glued in with their face in the fish finder is they're having so much fun understanding and learning bass behavior. That's what I found with Livescope. You can see how the fish are reacting to your baits, see how they're positioned on the bottom. And it's not, I'm going out here and just casting on this fish to see him bite it, because it's not that easy. Anyone who's used Livescope know it's not that easy. And if it was, every single guy on the Bassmaster Open who had a Livescope should be catching a limit every single day. There should be no reason why guys should not be catching a limit every single day of a fishing tournament if Livescope was that effective and that easy to use, and it was just go out there casting in a bucket, especially guys who are pro fishermen. So obviously even the best anglers in the world who have Livescope are not, now their weights aren't doubling and their success rate of catching a limit isn't doubling. It's kind of the same as it was before, and I see that. And I also just see the fact that with the Livescope, guys are getting to learn about how bass are setting up on a boulder or a rock, and they just like observing that. They just see it like, wow, that's so cool. I never knew what the bass were doing down there. I can now think through when I'm making my cast, here's what's actually going on under the water, and it opens up this new understanding and this new intrigue into fishing. And I see that part of it as a benefit a lot of times because you're now understanding nature. Now, I know you're understanding it through staring at a screen, but also my opinion is you're staring at a screen while also surrounded by beautiful nature, and you got the water and the birds chirping and everything. And that's much better than sitting on your couch eating a bag of potato chips and watching TV, on your wall. So I know that better is to have nothing and to be out there with no underwear, Randy, no socks, hunting all the food you eat and building your own campfire. But I mean, for me, I'm thinking it's still a good way to get some people out there, and I think it is still useful to get people engaged in the sport. That's my opinion too.
Okay, let's go back a little bit again about the unlevel playing field. I mean, it's just like the guy, if you guys, I'm sure everybody knows about those 2 kids that won the $1 million at Table Rock at the Bass Pro Open this past fall. And like anything else that was in the fall, they said they caught them. It was all about their Livescope, Livescope and over 100 foot of water, that type of stuff. It was always my theory that most of the better fish in the lake are just out there roaming around in the middle of the lake, and if they're not on the bank. And that was always I've thought about this for decades and decades, and there was always it was sort of like a comforting feeling a little bit, knowing that those fish were out there and that, you don't really know where they are. But now you got like those kids that won the tournament over 100 foot of water Livescoping out there. They have basically tapped into a segment of fish that you cannot win a tournament unless you're Livescoping. So when these kids were 20 years old, I think both of them were 20 or 21. When I was 21 years old or 20 years old, I had a 14-foot flat bottom with a 9-horse motor on it and 1 flasher and a 12-volt trolling motor, and that's all I could afford. I had to bust tables and mow lawns and wash cars just to put, $10 in my boat to go down to Grand Lake, once every 2 weeks, something like that. So if I look at my 20-year-old self back in 1978 or 79, I would not been I would have been just throwing my money away if I tried to compete against somebody like that had the resources to have those live scopes like that. And that's what I'm talking about, that the income disparity that we see in 2022 was not the same in 1980. There was nowhere near. That income disparity has skyrocketed with the technology over the past 10 years in particular. And I'm really concerned about, there's no limits on this technology right now. At this point, I am positive that the engineers at Lowrance and Garmin and Humminbird, they are doing everything they can to come up with the most wild, off the hook, out in left field, technology they can think of. Nobody is reining them in. And if we could have this same conversation, guys, 10 years from now, I think we'd look back now and you're going to see that these live scopes were like flashers, compared to what we have in 10 years from now. And I just think that's a tragedy for the sport, man. I just think in the big picture, that I think we're going to wind up to regret it. I really do.
I think at some point, though, they're going to put some boundaries on it. Like in golf, they're not going to let the golf balls get better and the technology get better, because at that point, everyone's just driving every single green. It becomes a driving and chipping or a driving and putting contest. I think it's going to be the same thing with fishing. They're going to put some bounds on it. I just don't think it's gotten there yet. And one thing I see here, Andy, there's a couple of comments. One, they're saying I'm not going to change your mind, which I already knew that going in, guys. But I said tries in the title of the video, not Jonny convinces Randy. It's Jonny tries to convince. Another thing is that people are saying, Jonny, if you're so good with, this is from Mark, if you're so good with Livescope, why the hell are you promoting it? Well, the thing is that I like the technology because it opens up a new type of fishing for me. And also, my whole thing is I'm supposed to be on the forefront of bass fishing technology. So if Livescope comes out, I want to learn how to use it and add it to my fishing. I've always been on the forefront of technology. That's how there's always those guys, they're on the bleeding edge of technology in industry and whatever. It's like saying, if Apple, you're so good with your computers, why would you go invent the iPhone? Why do an iPhone? That's stupid. You're doing great with computers. Just stick with computers, desktop computers for the rest of your life. There's no point to go make the iPhone. That's kind of how I think about it. Like, there's guys, some people just like to go to the next newest thing, and that's how I have been. I like to find the new advances. I love the discovery of new ways to catch fish, new types of fish, new bass behavior. And I love learning bass behavior. That's one thing I love more than anything. And I've learned so much about bass behavior from side imaging and down imaging. And I'm learning even more now with Livescope. And I can use that to make fishing fun for me. But also I know that Randy would have hated how I fished back in 2008. Or 2010, Randy. I was graphing for 5 hours a day in 2010. That was 12 years ago. And I was doing that. If you had talked to me then, you'd say, oh, Jonny, you're not really fishing. You're just staring at the screen all day. What are you doing? But I was already doing that 10, 12 years ago. So nothing's changed for me. I'm doing the same thing. And also, I use side imaging and down imaging literally 15 to 20 times more than I use Livescope. I still idle with my side imaging and down imaging for 4 to 6 hours every single fishing day most days, and I'll use my Livescope for 45 minutes to an hour when I'm actually fishing. So I'm still not using Livescope even nearly as much as I use the others, but I will talk about it and use it.
Yeah. And the thing about it, I don't mind getting left behind with technology. I really don't. I mean, a lot of people, I get comments all the time saying about, man, you're a dinosaur, you're going to get left behind. I don't mind getting left behind with that way of fishing. There's two different things here. First of all, I'll say that, every generation is smarter than the last one, because when I started, building lake map breakdowns, for Jonny with Fish the Moment, Jonny had to coach me like I was a little grade school kid with a computer. I just don't have the skills with that. And he can go through something in a split second and figure it out. Every generation is intellectually smarter than the last generation. So that's a given. I mean, I realize that the younger generation is going to be, more receptive, to technology, because that's part of their reality. I mean, that's the reality they grew up in. When I was in college, I graduated college, we didn't even have computers in college ever. I never used one computer my entire college time. I did everything with pen and paper. So that goes to tell you the difference with that. But, you know, and I guess one of the things that I can tell the guys out there that sort of agree with me, because I know there's a segment that do, is that you do not have to have this to compete. I mean, I talk about it creates an unlevel playing field, and it does for certain situations. But I just go back to, year before last in the Bassmasters Open, I finished 13th in the points. I had the fish hooked in all the tournaments to probably won the Bassmaster points title. And every single bass I caught was from nothing but 2D sonar. Nothing on down imaging, nothing on side imaging, 2D sonar, nothing else. So there are two populations of fish in every lake that you can catch. And I target those fish that don't require the technology. And I always will, because I just don't have any interest in going that direction. It just doesn't feel good to me. And that's ultimately, I think that's what we're talking about. It's like how you like to fish. There's, you have to fish your style, and that's just not mine.
For sure. And that's the same thing as my style is not to take all the electronics off my boat and go fishing. I feel like I'm fishing blind, and I really just don't enjoy it that much. Just casting aimlessly down the bank with no purpose, it seems like, or just randomly going around like, oh, there's a steeper bank or a flatter bank. Like, that doesn't get me excited anymore. That was exciting when I was like 12 years old, but now I can't. I would just get bored halfway through the day. And that's just because that's how I fish.
And it's addictive. Don't get me wrong, because you guys heard of Orlando Wilson? I think a lot of you guys probably have. He had the fishing show. You heard him, Jonny? Yeah, Orlando Wilson. Yeah. Anyway, I drew out Orlando in my second Bassmaster tournament down at West Point Lake in Georgia in 1985 or 86, something like that. And at the time, I didn't deep fish much at all. And Orlando had me out there in 1985 jigging a spoon in 45 foot of water, catching them doing that, showing me on the depth finder what the fish and the brush looked like. And it was fascinating. It was. I mean, I can't deny that, seeing that and catching fish like that was not cool to do, but it's something that you either like or you don't. It's like you guys that have taken people fishing before. Some people you can take them out fishing and they can have a great day fishing, and they just don't get excited about it. They could care less if they ever go again. And it's sort of the same with, catching fish with the high tech or flipping a jig up in 2 foot of water. I mean, that's the difference between it.
For sure. There's a question here from Jesse. Can you catch those suspended fish with 360 imaging? Yes, you can. You can definitely do that. So, I've actually done that before. There's no way, guys, on the 360 imaging to record the screen as of yet. I'm trying to actually work with Humminbird to see if we can find a way to do like they have a new fish finder coming out with an HDMI out where I can actually record it live. The screenshots look terrible, so that's why I've not done any 360 imaging stuff, because the screenshots from the fish finder are really, really bad. So we'll figure that out. So I'll do some videos on that. But no, I agree, Randy, on, it kind of is more about style and what you want to do. And obviously, Livescope, I don't think matches your style of fishing. And this is a hot take for me. Randy, I don't think if we put Livescope on your boat, you would do any better with or without it. I think if you put Livescope on your boat, it actually would probably hurt you and make you a worse bass fisherman. Because Livescope by itself, without side imaging and down imaging to complement it and an understanding of bass movement and positioning yourself offshore consistently, I think that you would spend a lot of time using it and just randomly going around and not catching fish. Because that's how I was when I first got Livescope. It took me about 6 months to figure out, okay, when do I actually need to use this versus not use it? And for me, I have a lot more reasons to use it because I'm fishing offshore. I think you would have fewer reasons to use it, to the point where you might find that it takes too much time to find good ways to apply it to your style of fishing, and it applies so infrequently that it may not even be useful for you. And that's one thing that I'm kind of helping your side of the argument here, but I wanted to put that out there because I don't think that Livescope is necessarily for everybody, because there is still a learning curve with it. You still have to put time on the water with it, and the guys who are really, really good with Livescope, I guarantee you, 98% of them are also very, very good with down imaging and side imaging before they ever got Livescope.
Yeah, it's sort of, that's a good point you make. It reminds me back the worst season, I think, or one of the worst seasons I ever had in my whole career was the second year I fished Bassmaster, which was 1987, because I had fished with so many good guys, so many good anglers, pros, the first year. Hank Parker, Tommy Martin, Clun, a bunch of guys the first year out there, and I saw one guy would go. He'd be fishing deep, like when I fished with Tommy Martin, he caught him 30 foot deep at Sam Rayburn. And then when I fished with somebody else, they caught him 2 foot deep. And all year long, you were back and forth between guys wanting to fish deep, guys wanting to catch them shallow. So I had all this new information just bombarding my brain, at 24 years old. And the next season I went out there and I didn't know how I wanted to fish. I'd get out there and practice like, man, do I need to fish deep? Or do I need to fish shallow? Do I need to spend an hour out here deep and then an hour shallow? And I got spread myself so thin that I just could not hardly catch a fish that second year because I didn't make a commitment. And it's just like with the way Jonny fishes. I mean, he gets out there and graphs for 6 hours. I could never do that. But it's a commitment that he makes to do that. And that's why he only makes 300 casts a day, because that's all he needs to make once he finds a spot. So it's...
Well,
there's yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's really interesting, and one thing that I thought was kind of, and I agree with that too, Randy. One thing, this is an interesting comment. I saw some people earlier saying they asked why I don't fish tournaments. I've talked about this like dozens of times, but I thought this was an interesting take on it. It was from Nicholas. He says, it feels like it's killing your competitive nature instead of what it should do. It should make you want to beat those guys and show them what's up in terms of fishing and electronics and stuff. And I guess part of that is true in the sense that, like, I don't really have... I've told people this before. By the time I was 21 years old, I'd fished 150 or 157 bass fishing tournaments, like team tournaments, individual tournaments. I won a lot of stuff, college tournaments, junior tournaments, stuff like that, junior Bassmasters. I lost all competitive desire for bass fishing, and I really have no competitive desire, like to go out and say, oh, I can catch fish better than some other guy on some lake, and also spend a week practice fishing and then fishing, and like all of that is so unappealing to me in so many ways. The thing that I love, Randy, is going to a lake I haven't been to in like 6 months or a year, or best case scenario, go to a brand new lake I've never been to, find the fish that day and catch them. That brings me the most satisfaction. Going out and practicing for 3 or 4 days before a tournament, knowing exactly where all the fish are and what's going on, and then having all these other anglers around jumping on spots and trying to like outmaneuver them and all that stuff, and then trying to, catch fish, the same exact fish for 4 days in a row. That takes literally every ounce of fun out of bass fishing for me. My thing I love to do is finding fish, catching a few of them, then finding more fish, and doing it on a place where I've never been before, and like it's that discovery process. So for me, tournament bass fishing, aside from not being a great financial career path, I just don't feel that, like, I don't feel like I am like awesome for beating another guy on a lake when he found fish better than I did in practice over 3 days and strategizing. Like, I think some people really like that. I would love the kind of like the Major League Fishing. If every fishing tournament was Major League Fishing style and it was just no practice, just go to the lake day of, never seen the lake, like old Bassmaster Classic style, like the first Bassmaster Classic where it's a mystery lake and you go out there and you fish for first day of the tournament, just go. I would love competitive bass fishing. I would do it all the time. The way it's set up now, though, it doesn't, not interesting to me. So maybe that's because of electronics, maybe that's because of something else. But that's at least my 2 thoughts on that too.
Yeah, the competition is definitely not for everybody out there, and that's the great thing about the sport is like you can do it on whatever level you want to. And I think the ultimate question, though, what we have to ask ourselves, as far as when we've talked about this before, as far as at what point what point have you crossed the line? And ultimately, the people that are going to have to decide this is the tournament directors. They are the ones that are going to have to put the brakes on this, because until the tournament director puts the brakes on it, there's no incentive for anyone else, even industry people that are creating this stuff, to back off of it. So I think at some point you're going to have some tournament directors or tournament organizations say, guys, we can't do this. You know, this is going to be limited to 2D down imaging, side imaging. That's the equipment you can have in this tournament. You can't have all this other, you know, stuff that is that has remained to be created yet, that is in the works right now. And that's coming down the pipe for sure. Unless the tournament organizations are so greedy that they just do not care, and it's just like, you know, it's a free for all and anything goes and whatever. And I hope we don't ever get to that point, though.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, Randy, I got one more question for you, and this is my last question. This is gonna be very telling, I think. So choose your answer with care. Mm-hmm. Let's say next month there is a brand new swim bait that comes out of Japan. It is this glide bait. There is no technology in it. The only thing about this lure is it is made from a secret special wood that only grows in one forest in Japan, and it's about to go extinct. This bait can be thrown in any water conditions, clear, dirty, stuff like that, and you reel it through the water, and you have to have the perfect retrieve. You have to learn the retrieve of it. It's not one of those things that you can just pick up and just go throw, but if you can learn the techniques of it, learn the nuances of it, you can absolutely catch a ton of fish and play super high in all these tournaments. The only catch is that this bait is $3,000. So you have to spend $3,000 on this special swim bait with all this wood. You maybe need to spend 100 to 300 hours perfecting how to retrieve it and all that stuff. But once you do, you're great at fishing. No technology. It's all natural. Some guy is carving him in his shed in Japan. He's actually like a I can't think, Amish. He's Amish, Japanese Amish man, carving these from hand with a knife he's forged himself in his backyard, and he's selling them for $3,000. Would that be okay with you?
Absolutely not. I would treat that lure the same way as the One Ring to rule them all from Lord of the Rings and throw it in the fires of Mordor. That would be my answer to that.
I doubt that, Randy. I'm calling BS on that one. I bet you'd be all about that. You'd have the best lure. You'd have a picture of it on your thumbnail. Or this would be the thumbnail, guys. This would be the lure. Take this away. It would be this right here, and it would be the nose of that super secret swim bait, just like this. It would be like that over here. That would be his thumbnail. It would be the nose of that swim bait, and it would say best swim bait ever, and you say only in Japan, and you'd say this thing is amazing. I'm calling BS on that one. I call that a point in my book right there.
No, I think anything like that is just so good that it takes out the skill or anything, the magic about fishing. I just don't see that as something that's any good. You know, I really don't.
I don't know. I think that that's kind of the
that's
same.
Sort of like the laser guided putter type analogy a little bit.
Yeah, like it's I think it's kind of one of those deals where you have the thin line. I know a lot of it is mystery fishing and all that stuff, and I know I went pretty hard on Randy today because I called you out for having this basically the same exact unit costs on your boat as what it is for Livescope. I called out the fact that the mystery of fishing has been broken for 20 years, despite maybe your denial of that. So I feel like we've poked some holes in your argument, Randy, but I think at the end of the day, what we can take away for sure is that Randy is not getting Livescope out of principle more than fact. It is more of an emotional decision. Would you agree with that, Randy?
You're right in the fact that I'm never going to get Livescope. I've just got my heels dug in too much with that over there, but. I don't know. I think what happens is when you get my age, you start to get a little cranky and or crabby a little bit. And I always remember when I was your age, Johnny, it's like you'd always talk about guys my age and say, well, he's just a cranky old fart, you know. It's just like that's the cycle of life, man. That's just the way it goes, I guess.
For sure. Man, people are saying my Japanese Amish they say I'm smoking something over here. No.
I will address one thing because I do get a lot of slack because I've been with Megabass forever, and guys will say, "Yeah, how can you talk about Livescope when you got a $25 jerk bait. $25 is not $20,000. $25 for a bait is affordable. $20,000 for electronic setup is a completely different reality there.
Yeah, yeah. It's just, hey, it depends on what you want to spend your money. Because I will say, Randy, is that if we took all the Megabass jerkbaits in your boat right now and piled them all up, you'd have enough money for about 12 Livescopes. So I will put it that way.
Yeah, that might be true, probably.
You should do a swap. Just give them like one little cubby of your Megabass box, or like half of one of your Megabass box. Trade it for a Livescope. I'm sure you could find that deal somewhere.
Yeah, well, I'm really interested to see how this all plays out because and the reason I say this is I'm just basing it upon the comments I get from my YouTube subscribers about how many people agree with what I'm talking about. And there's a lot of guys out there that, they call me the dinosaur type thing. I mean, that's you're going to have that. But man, there's a lot of people out there that are sort of on my side on this deal. It's really it's definitely balanced. It's not an even balance. I mean, it's definitely tilted to the anti-tech guys, or at least from the ones that commented with me there. It is.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the one thing we really like, guys, about our audience is that we kind of, obviously I'm more like the young gun with the technology and all that stuff and give Randy a hard time here. And Randy has his kind of more old school mentality, but they both work to catch fish. And I feel like part of it is I personally feel that guys get too caught up in competition in bass fishing. And I honestly don't think the competition in bass fishing is that great. It got me into the sport and it got me excited about it. But the main reason I used to fish competitively, Randy, is because the only way I could actually fish is in tournaments. We had the Junior Bassmaster tournaments where we would go out and I could ride around with someone. There was guys who volunteered their boats. And huge shout out to all those guys up in Wisconsin, Junior Bassmasters, who would take us out in their boats for the day and just let us fish. That's how I actually got introduced to the sport. And I was able to, and I say sport, but that's how I was able to get introduced to bass fishing. And that's why I kept going in the tournament route. It's just because the only way I could continue to fish before I got my own boat was by doing these tournaments. But what I found is that once I got my own boat, my interest in tournaments continually was on a decline, and it declined consistently to the point where I just completely quit. And I think that revolving our entire expectations on bass fishing around tournaments, around competing against other anglers, personally, I think it diminishes the point of bass fishing. I like my challenges on my YouTube channel where I do catch 15 challenges, where I try to catch 15 pounds of bass. The reason I do that and I set that amount, guys, is because I like to challenge myself. It's not like I don't like to compete. I just don't like to compete against other guys, like other fishermen. I want to compete against the fish. That's a hard enough challenge for myself, and I don't want to have to worry about what is this other guy doing across the lake or anything like that. I want to be focused on catching those fish, and I set that 15-pound mark because that's just based on the average fish quality and my chances of catching fish. And for me, doing a catch 15 challenge by myself and filming it and putting it on YouTube is 1,000 times more enjoyable than going and fishing a fishing tournament, because I get to focus on me against nature, me against the fish. And that's really what fishing has always been about, Randy. It's competing against the fish to catch them so we can eat them for food. It's you against the fish. It's that primal connection. And I do feel like that's really important personally. So I kind of on a soapbox maybe about that a little bit. It's that primal connection with you versus the fish. I think as you add tournament bass fishing into it, it really throws that all into a whack. So that might be just something to think about. And hopefully you guys get a lot of other great tournament information from other guys. You can check out Todd Castledine's channel, Bradley Hallman, Brandon Polinook, Chris Aldane has some videos, tournament videos. You can check out all their videos. Jacob Wheeler, Scott Martin, sorry, they're leaving out some of the big ones. They all have tournament videos. Go check those guys out if you want to learn about tournaments and how to prepare and all that stuff. But if you just want to learn about bass behavior and enjoying bass fishing and just catching fish, that's kind of what we do here on Fish the Moment. This isn't fish the tournaments, it's fish the moment. So that's one last little deal there, Randy. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that tournament fishing takes away from a lot of the purity and the sort of the properties I talk about a lot in fishing. It really does. I mean, you can't get around it. So I agree with you on that. Just one thing real quick, guys. I want to remind everybody that's still listening. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but Jonny and I have our online advanced jerkbait seminar this coming Thursday. It's going to be a 3-hour seminar. You guys can sign up for that at fishthemoment.com. Jonny's going to talk about jerkbait fishing with the Livescope. I'm going to give you guys the old school approach. It's going to be packed with info. So I think Jonny said we only had like 3 or 4 spots left. So you guys interested in that, sign up, man.
For sure. Thank you for calling that out, Randy. That's going to be January 20th. That's a Thursday night, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And you can sign up here, again, on fishthemoment.com on our website just by going to the virtual seminars page. And this seminar, guys, if you can't attend live, you can still sign up. And everyone who signs up is going to get a recording of the seminar. It's going to be 3 hours long. You'll get the entire recording sent to you. So even if you can't attend live on Thursday, January 20th at that time, you can still sign up. We'll send you that recording. Everyone who signs up gets a recording. You can watch that back as many times as you want for as long as you want. So really appreciate you guys checking that out. I'll be talking about jerkbaits and Livescope, and also on offshore jerkbait fishing without Livescope. And then Randy will be focused more on shallow water jerkbait fishing, and then all of his little tips and tricks and all that stuff. Good stuff. So definitely check that out. Also, guys, again, if you are beta tester for the Deep Dive app, we are working really hard to get this Deep Dive app out here very, very shortly. We don't have it open to the public yet, but we are going to have it out very, very soon. So all the beta testers who made it into the beta group when we launched it, I think there's like about 500 of you. We just added a ton more lakes. I think we only had like 80 lakes in there initially. Now we have 350 lakes. So we've opened up the lakes to a lot more states, added some of the lakes you guys requested. And we've also been just messing with the thresholds on some of the algorithms and kind of dialing it in a little bit more. Added species. Now I think spotted bass should be in there now, so you should be able to actually find spotted bass. And we're going to be adding smallmouth here after launch, so it won't be there for launch, but we're working to get all that in there. And if you haven't checked out Deep Dive, you can go to deepdiveapp.com, get a little more info. And if you are a beta tester, just send us an email at help@deepdiveapp.com if you have any feedback, any bugs you find specifically, anything you'd like us to change, any things that you enjoy about the app, anything like that is very, very helpful if you're in that beta. Again, huge shout out to our sponsors for the night, Bridgeford and the Bass Tank. I did not do the Bridgeford giveaway, Randy. I'm just going to do that for next week because we still have like 300 people here. Normally there's other people. If you made it all the way to the end, after this video is posted live or posted onto YouTube, not here in the comments, but afterwards, let us know what your opinion is about who won this argument. Did Jonny win or did Randy win? We're going to do kind of a straw poll in the comment section. Don't put it in the chat here. Put it in the actual comments of the YouTube video after it posts. You can't put the comment in now, but we'll end the stream. You can put a comment there. And we're going to see, we want to know if I won the argument or if Randy did and why. And we're going to pick one of those responses of who won and why, and we're going to give them a free case of Bridgeford beef jerky next week on the stream. So definitely huge shout out to Bridgeford for sponsoring the live stream. And also huge shout out to the Bass Tank. If you guys want an affordable Livescope option and basically find out what Livescope's all about, what we've talked about today, you can check it out at thebasstank.com. You can get a bundle right now with a 9-inch unit with a Livescope and the transducer for $2,200. Really good deal. So definitely check that out. There's also a mail-in rebate with this, so you could probably even get it for like $2,000. I think there's a $200 mail-in rebate also. So really, really good deal. And Randy, that is about it. Anything, first off, did I convince you at all? Did what I talk about change your opinion at all? Or is it going to change how you talk about Livescope at all? Or is it like completely ineffective?
I think you're pretty ineffective tonight, Jonny. You made some really good points, though. I mean, I think you probably, if it was anybody besides me, you could have convinced them. But you know how deep I've got my heels dug in. But you put up a really good fight against it. I'd say that.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I gave it my best shot, guys. Hopefully, you guys will let us know in the comments who won the argument. Either way, but hopefully, you guys are enjoying this. And also, there's a question about the app. I'll be announcing the app on like every platform. So if you're a subscriber and you watch any Fish the Moment videos or watch the live stream, you're not going to miss the app launch. Don't worry. I will be blasting it out everywhere. It'll be almost to the point where it's obnoxious because I've been working on that app for 2 years now, almost 2.5 years now. So yeah, I'm not going to let you guys miss it. Don't worry. And if you guys are on the Fish Moment newsletter too on fishmoment.com, you can actually go sign up for our newsletter, and it'll be in the newsletter announcement. We're going to be doing weekly newsletters starting here in February. You can just scroll all the way down to the bottom. You can hit subscribe here to our newsletter, and we update you on stuff. I give you my top patterns for the week with like different areas and stuff like that. So good info in here, and it gives you just lets you stay up to date with what's going on with Fish at the Moment. So yeah. There we go. Okay, Randy. Well, despite the fact that I did not succeed in convincing you to get Livescope, hopefully you guys enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully you guys are going to be, maybe forming a different opinion, maybe keeping the same opinion, whatever it is, and learning a little bit every time you join the stream. Hopefully you enjoyed. Again, Randy and I are not mad at each other. I went pretty hard on Randy in this one. Normally I don't pull those low blows like calling out the number of times I won challenges and stuff like that. That was just for today, guys. I'm not. That's not my normal way of going about it. I tried to stay humble and kind over here, but when you're in an argument, you gotta go for the jugular every once in a while.
Hey, we've got our best challenge coming up. They're coming out with my Block It Old School Jig this Friday on my YouTube channel, and Johnny's got his Jewel Fish the Moment offshore jig, and we're going to do a challenge, the offshore jig versus the old school flipping jig. That's going to be the epic challenge that we've ever had. We'll see how that goes down.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. We'll probably end up doing that one probably in March, you think, Randy? End of February, yeah. March. So it's a fair playing field with that shallow and the offshore. So that'll be fun too. Good deal. Well, guys, again, hopefully you guys enjoyed the stream. Let us know down in the comments down below who won the argument and why, to get a chance to win a free case of Bridgeford beef jerky next week on the stream. We'll see you guys back here next week, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, same place. Subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss the notification, and like the video to help us with the algorithm. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you all next week.